A very good evening, friends from India, and for a few of the friends who are joining from other time zones, a great day to you. I am really glad to welcome you all to this webinar, which is being launched on the eve of the publication of my book, titled Job Readiness for IT and ITES. And one of the highlights of this book, and therefore this webinar, is we have tried to make it a student companion. And what do I mean by a student companion? So if you are going to travel and you look at a travel companion, you don't have to go anywhere else. And that one travel companion will really tell you where to go, what to buy, what to look for, what to avoid, what to do more, what are the other resources that are there that you can really make use of. I felt we badly needed a similar companion for students to make their journey from campus to corporates, and specifically so for the IT and ITES industries. IT and ITES industries, friends, despite all the conversation that happen in the media, is a very large employer of graduates. Every year the industry onboards about 3 lakh graduates who have never worked before, and that's a very large number. And this has been happening for some years, and I believe it will continue to happen in the future as well. So the IT industry is going to onboard a large number of graduates. The problem is that the number of graduates who are available and aspiring to enter the industry is a lot more and increasing very rapidly. And it is in this juncture that preparing to enter the industry becomes challenging. And it is at this juncture that corporations are going to look and sift and be very careful about whom they are selecting and whom they are not selecting. And it is at this juncture, we as students or as faculty or as training and placement officers who are doing their noble jobs every day need a single place, a single book where a student trying to enter the industry can actually dip into and address all aspects of entering the industry. Firstly, is it good for me? Would I like to do these jobs? Can there be a test that will tell me will I enjoy doing this job or not enjoy doing this job? The second is, am I suitable for it? Inherently, am I strong enough for it? Are my strengths and the needs of the industry coincide? Or is it not the right thing for me? Is it not the right career decision for me? So that's the second question. Right from that question to where are the opportunities? How do I find them? Who are the keepers of these opportunities? How do I reach them? Should I email or do a LinkedIn connect? Whole host of questions to actually hunt for the job that you really wish to get into is also a big deal. And after you hunt for the job, understanding which job exactly are you applying for? What are its characteristics? That's again a big ask, a different dimension. How do you write your CV and cover letter for it? How do you follow up on your application? And how do you really appear in the selection process? What is the selection process for each of these jobs? Will there be a written test? How many sections? What is the cutoff? All sorts of questions are there. But in the last few years, we noticed that there isn't a resource that brings them all together. And this book is an attempt to do just that, to bring them all together. Even after you enter the job, participate in the selection process, and do get a job offer, how do you really adjust to this corporate life? How do you make sure your first year is a great year? How do you start right in your corporate career? So this is a companion, and just like a travel companion, we believe if you adopt it, you don't have to go to many places. And using this companion, which has built-in exercises, there are about hundreds of exercises inside the companion. And as you keep doing these exercises, checking with friends, interacting with me on the online learning center, I wish that your preparation from here to there will be a lot more systematic. Your confidence from a campus life to being a successfully employed IT professional will be a lot more confident. I think that's the aim of this book. So with this, that's the companion approach I really was talking about. I will, in this webinar, talk about a few of the aspects of this whole transition from being aspiring for a job in the IT industry to being job ready to performing well in the first year by dipping into sections of this book and actually highlighting them in the webinar. And this is obviously illustrative. So if there are 7 examples in the book or 8 points in the book, I'm going to actually pick up 1 or 2 so that you get a flavor of what is inside the book that which you may eventually use. So I talk about 2 characters that I came across in my own life. Okay, and when I say in my own life, it's either me or my friends with whom I heard these stories. There was a bright lady called Priya, who joined a very large IT services firm, and she was very focused, extremely driven. She would really be on top of her stuff, and she would be keen to prove a lot to her seniors. And about 30 days into her job, she went to her supervisor and said, "How am I doing?" The supervisor looked at her, one long glance and said that you're doing well, but there's only one question that I will ask you. Did you establish relationships in the first 1 month of your job, or are you really focused on job performance only? Do you have friends? Will they help you? If you do become a fast tracker and perform well, will some of your peers today report to you? So these are questions that manager asked Priya, and he asked these questions mainly because Priya was not doing well in that area. In her eagerness to do a lot more, to prove, to make a splash, she was actually getting everybody in trouble. She was not tapping into the informal networks that are there in the organization. In the same year, there was another girl, a bright girl, probably not as bright as Priya, who joined a mid-sized IT services company. In fact, in her fresher training, she did not even come on top of the class, she came somewhere in the middle of the class. And since there was a rationing of opportunities and said that people who did very well in the training got the best of opportunities, so the counselor asked Vidya, saying that, look, in 2 weeks, there may be a client and there may be a development job that may come in. But there is a documentation job right now available for a Japanese client of ours. Make a choice. And Vidya was keen not to forego a real life opportunity. It didn't matter to her that it was a documentation job. So she quickly went into the documentation job and slowly learned the ropes, went to each of her project mates and asked, I'm doing this for you, can I do a little more? Can you tell me what your work is all about? Can I do a bit of it for you since you are really hassled? And in that process, she actually got into the ropes of the project very, very conveniently. And at some point, one of the project team members went on maternity leave, and naturally Vidya was asked to do this job, which was a higher job. She then now graduated to testing. And from testing, she did so well that she was asked to do development. And after one and a half years, she was asked to informally lead a particular module. And that's what Vidya did. Whereas what happened to Priya? So 45 days later, she actually made a mistake. And because she was keen to prove herself, she blamed everybody else, and everybody pounced on her and said that no, this is not a teammate that we want to work with. And soon enough, the manager decided that it'll be a good idea if Priya did get transferred to a new team. She was sent to the new team, she repeated the same mistake again, and within a year, she left the company. Now if you notice, while Vidya, who was probably not such a bright student compared to Priya, was probably not as intelligent compared to Priya, succeed, whereas Priya did not succeed. And believe me, this whole drama happens every day in organizations. And it is pretty much some of these differences between what a campus is like and what a corporate is like. If people don't figure out how to navigate, they end up being the Priyas of the world rather than the Vidyas of the world. So what are those differences? Again, I am highlighting only an example from each one. Firstly, the world of work is a different setup compared to the campus. What do I mean by setup? For example, in college, you have control over your time. You are told that this is a timetable. You need to follow the timetable. There is no such timetable at office. And in fact, other people control your time a lot more than you can control your time. This basic setup difference causes a lot of issues in adaptation when a student who is otherwise good goes into this campus corporate life. And that makes the student very frustrated. Let me take another example, the demand difference. The demand in campus is that you are good, you ask good questions, and professors are actually paid to solve the questions that you ask. Whereas in corporate life it's the other way around. You are paid to solve the boss's problems. Therefore there is a big demand difference. You have to take initiative. There is an evaluation difference too. In campus you know that your quarterly exam, your half-yearly exam, your semester exam, your mid-semester exam, your final exam, your practical exam are going to happen on such and such a date. You also know this is the syllabus that is going to be asked. But in corporate, there is no such standard evaluation. You hardly know when you are getting evaluated. You are probably being evaluated every day. And your boss does not know when he or she is forming his impressions about you. So there are three big differences, and I just gave an example for each one of them. Setup, you are not in control of your time versus you are in control of your time. Demand, you need to take initiative, you need to follow rules versus you need to follow rules. Evaluation, you know when you are going to get evaluated versus in corporates, you don't know when you are going to get evaluated. So these three differences between the nature of a campus or a college and the nature of a corporation or a company really gives rise to a lot of different competencies, skills that you need to display that are perhaps not tested in campus life. Again, I am highlighting a few, and more details are available in comprehensively in the book. For example, the world of work is a dynamic place. So you need to know how to operate and execute in this dynamic place. And you don't know who has the right answer. So when you have to execute in this dynamic place, you need to know how to tolerate ambiguity. When something is not clear, you can't get stuck. You will have to still make your forward movements. You need to make some reasonable assumptions, and you need to keep moving. You need to make decisions on time, right? That's an example of the need to operate in a dynamic environment. You need to be savvy in corporate, right? Remember, you could ask questions to your professor and the professor has to explain to you. Whereas in the corporate life, you have to solve your boss's problems. So you need to be savvy. The ability to relate to a boss and to manage that relationship, the ability to relate to subordinates or team members in the initial years, the ability to understand the dynamics of the organization, who is saying what and why, they are all important areas of competence that get tested in a corporate, don't get tested in a campus. And the third cluster of competencies that you need to be good at is the ability to pursue results with vigor. So you often find people are not able to focus their attention, the needs of the meeting, the discussions on the goal that we want to achieve. And whereas in campus you tend to debate and deliberate, in a corporate you need to bring them all together. You need to achieve results. So that is one aspect of vigorous pursuit that you need to be good at. The second aspect of vigorous pursuit is you need to be tenacious. You can't give up. So for example, when a problem is there and it is difficult to solve, you can't give it up. After a day, after 2 days, you need to keep at it. I think that's again an example of vigorous pursuit that you need to be good at a corporate. If you look back at your own life, right, can you really delineate, could you operate in a dynamic environment? Do you have instances of where the situation was unclear and you are really able to operate in that environment? Just think about it. Were you savvy? Did you navigate a very difficult conflict? Did you have disagreements? For example, you could have conducted your college cultural show and the team had differences of opinion. Were you able to maneuver this savvily? Do you have an example in your real life like that? Have you persisted on doing something for a long period of time and finally mastered it? Can you give an example of how you pursued something with great vigor? So these are competencies that are going to be tested in the corporate life that are perhaps not tested in campus life. Now this again means that these differences have to be understood. You need to be good at these competencies. Only then you will be job ready for any job in any industry. Now if you go back to the IT industry and specifically talk about it, you need to also master about 4 major areas. One is where are the jobs, the job market awareness. Who are the large employers of the industry? How many people they recruit every year? Right? What kind of profiles they recruit? Which locations they recruit for? What kind of things they look for? What is their minimum selection filter? How much scores should you have got? That's awareness of the job market. How do you know, if you're, especially if that company doesn't patronize your college, how do you really make an application? How do you write a covering letter? How do you follow up on that? That is the art and skill of job hunting. So that's an area of preparation that you need to be very good at. And what are the basic mistakes that people make in the CV? How to avoid them? Right? That's an example of or an area of job hunting that you need to be very good at. The second aspect is, every job has a secret, right? And every job has a rhythm as well. So you need to understand the secret of the job that you are applying for. For example, what is the basic purpose of the job? Which function does the job belong to? What are the key responsibilities? Who are the stakeholders that the job holder has to interact every day? What does a typical day look like? What are the main challenges that the job poses to the incumbent? So in the book I have delineated about 10 such questions. If you answer those 10 questions about any job that you are really applying for, you will actually get to understand the secret of the job. Right? And so use the principles of job literacy. Just like we are literate and numerate when we know alphabets and numbers, similarly, one need to be job literate. How to become job literate in a systematic manner and how to become job literate with reference to the major jobs in IT is again an area of preparation that will increase your job readiness. The next is the selection process. Again, if you look at the nature of this job and you look at a company, that company and the job as a combination will give rise to a selection process. So those are the steps of selection that one will have to qualify before one gets an offer. And what are those steps of selection? And no point in preparing for the job without understanding what those selection steps are. And whether the step is a selection step or an elimination step. We'll shortly talk about the selection step and the elimination step in the subsequent slides. And lastly, once you get a job offer and you are about to join the company, what are the 4-5 phases that you have to navigate? What do you do from now to joining? What do you do on day one? What do you do in your first assignment? What do you do in your first appraisal? So it's not only important that you get a job, but that you also start it well and really do a good job of it. And if you have to do that, you need to navigate the first year. Now, these are the areas of preparation from a student perspective. Now, from an institution perspective, there is a particular method in which all of these can be brought together so that students shorten their preparation time, and with whatever time they have, they become more prepared, they are confident of facing the selection process, and ultimately they are more job ready. Again, we'll talk a little bit about it in the subsequent slides. Now we talked about the 3 differences and the 3 expectations. Now let's deep dive to IT. So in the IT industry, and I spent about 18 years here, and in fact all my 18 years I have tried to make notes on how do people make transitions between campus to corporate, who succeeds and who does not, and having had the good fortune of interviewing or screening lakhs of resumes and interviewing thousands of people and actually mentoring again thousands of people into the organization, I have learned a few things, and my idea is to share it back with all of you so that your own preparation and job readiness becomes much easier. Now, if you look at the key job profiles that the IT selects for, one is the software engineer and its variations. Right? This is where you typically associate with configuration or programming. So the application development and maintenance profile, the package-based deployment profile, and the product development or engineering profile are the 3 sub-profiles in what you call as software engineering. And in the book, you have details on each of these profiles, the 10 questions and answers that unlock the secret of these jobs, the selection process behind these profiles, and the rationale for these selection processes, the typical cutoffs that you will really require to pass, sample exercises where you can really check whether you meet the cutoff or not, tips for preparation for these profiles, and what kind of supplemental preparation that you need to do, your own gap analysis, how ready are you today if you were to be assessed against these profiles, would you qualify or not. So that is the structure of how these profiles have been detailed. So the IT infrastructure administrator is a second variant profile. Again, that is something that is growing in large numbers in India, and typically it is to maintain or troubleshoot IT infrastructure deployed in client organizations. So IT infrastructure can be your desktop, a server, a data center, and so on. So there are a large number of profiles recruited in this space, and therefore it's important to understand this profile. The next one, or the next major profile, is the IT enabled back office associate, and with a lot of back office being outsourced to India in what you call as classical BPO plus KPO industry. So this profile also is something that happens in large numbers, to which campus joinees can more easily hope to gain an entry. Again, the requirements of this profile, the kind of selection steps in this profile, the cutoffs for this profile, how do you prepare, where do you stand vis-a-vis the requirements are all detailed in the book. So these are specific job profiles specific to IT industry, in which the industry actually makes large volumes of recruitment, and the title of these jobs may be called a little bit differently in different companies, but they essentially fall in these 5 profile areas. So that's something that we will, you will get to see a lot more in the book. For example, to take this, the application development and maintenance profile, it will involve a CV shortlisting, which means that you will have to have a minimum score, a track record in terms of not having arrears at that point in time. Then your CV should be basically well written with all the key data that is available for recruiters. Then you need to actually qualify for a written test, and post the written test, some companies do have a GD, many do not. Then you will have a technical interview and a HR interview. And once you clear all this, you have a job offer to the application development and maintenance profile. So we'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide as to what are the selection areas and how to prepare for each one of them. I'm switching to the next slide as to where do I hunt. So as I said, one of the big problem areas for Indian students is that their campuses are not patronized by companies, simply because the number of colleges in the country are very high. But one good news as far as the industry is concerned is the industry also is trying to hunt for talent not only from named campuses but from the larger marketplace. Thanks to social networks like LinkedIn and thanks to social platforms like Facebook, now companies are able to reach large numbers of students by doing a city kind of walk-in. And to be able to know about it, I think you need to know the art and science of job hunting. So for example, if I notice students whose colleges are not patronized by the companies, they are quite often daunted. Where do I begin? I do not know anybody. How do I really reach anybody? So they often start with some wrong attitudes. They think that the whole world will somehow either conspire to give them a job or the whole world will deny them a job, and both of which are not true. The reality is that companies and recruiters are fairly busy people and they really don't have time. If at all they are indifferent to your application, neither are they overtly inclined to your application nor are they disinclined to your application. So that is a wrong attitude to have, saying that either I am too lucky or I am too unlucky. You are neither. I think the way to look at job hunting is to first create a terrain map. Where are the recruitments happening? Who are the large employers? What is the recent businesses that they have acquired that they will require more people to actually fulfill those businesses? So you need to create a terrain map. The next is to create a selection process map. So if it is company A, what are the selection steps for company A? And which is the email ID to which the application need to be sent? Is there a code that need to be followed? Make sure that you write the subject line correctly. Make sure your CV is self-contained. For example, I have seen people who write a CV and who write a cover letter as 2 different documents, who put their phone number and email ID in the email that they send to, and they expect the recruiter to put all the 3 together and actually invite them for a selection process. Though their CVs are not self-contained. So make the CV self-contained. There are some basic errors that people make in their CV. I think if you go to the book, you will have more details on what those basic errors are and how to avoid them. So that's something that you can get more of in the book. And you will have to estimate your chances. How many people are there in your city? How many applicants are going to be there? How many job opportunities are going to be there? With that in mind, would you reconsider locating to a different location? For example, would you want to move from your current city to some other city in search for a job? Is that a good thing for you or a bad thing? Again, there are exercises in the book, and as you finish those exercises, you will have the right answers in terms of whether to move from your current city or stay in the current city and really look for a job opportunity. So, and when you follow up on your CV, I have never seen a recruiter actually have 3 conversations or 3 email traffics with a candidate, especially when the candidate is a fresher with no experience. Therefore, you need to make sure that in perhaps 2 emails, all the necessary information has been exchanged. So that email has to be drafted very carefully. all questions that the recruiter has asked or is forcing or will ask in the next email have to be written in advance. It has to be readily presentable and easily readable. So there are, and how to write a cover letter and how to write that CV in different circumstances have been again detailed in the book. Now if you look at the selection steps, right? So not all steps are selection steps. So what do I mean by a selection step? Selection step is one in which you are actually getting scores and the first 20, 30, 40 people are being selected because they all have met a certain cutoff. The other is an elimination step, and believe me, the written test is often an elimination step. And what you do, you are trying to weed out bad candidates so that the minimum time that recruiters have is spent usefully on people who qualify or who have a chance of success. So when you are appearing for an elimination step, for example, if you are appearing for a written test and it's an elimination step, make sure that your score in quantitative ability, your verbal ability, your programming logic, all are reasonably adequate. So you can't be so weak in some and get eliminated in the whole process altogether. So you need to understand which step is a selection step and which is an elimination step. And when you are in an elimination step, make sure you don't get eliminated by getting the minimum threshold. Again, you will find for each of the profiles what could be a minimum threshold for not getting eliminated in the process. Right? So that's something that you will find more of. Again, this is something that students who are not preparing systematically miss out as to what is selection step, what is elimination step, and how to really make use of this information to appear and become job ready. The other is about developing job insights. Job insights are the 10 questions that I asked you, and when you ask these 10 questions about any job, and you don't even have to ask yourself, right? You can actually go and interview a current incumbent. You can interview a senior of yours using those 10 questions and say, how do you describe this job? What do you state at its purpose? What are the 4 key responsibilities that you have that you will be evaluated on? Right? Whom do you interact with every day? What challenges are particularly daunting for you? So again, use those 10 questions to develop insights of the job. When you are in an interview situation and you display this insight on the job, you will have a distinctive advantage over somebody who has just gone through the written test and doesn't know what the job is all about. Now there are social networks, and if I ask you, as people who are preparing for this exam, or ask my training and placement officer friends, how many of your students have 100 LinkedIn connections? And how many of those connections are relevant that they will help the individual job hunt, or they will help the individual seek information about the industry, the market, the awareness and trends and so on, right? I think what do you have that? For example, that is basic hygiene these days. And I know for a fact that the IT and the placement officers are actually operating under tremendous constraints, and they are doing a phenomenal job over the years compared to the constraints and limitations that they have. And in the book, I have tried to create a chapter mainly for placement officers to say within these constraints, can we do something a little differently? And that's for the placement officers to consider and comment on, and to make sure that as a country we create more and more job ready candidates. So there are many battles from college to office, and one is how do I hunt for a job when I'm not invited to participate in the process? How do I navigate the process of selection? How do I develop job insights so that I can display them during the selection process? And how do I leverage the social networks that are an advantage for me today to be able to make the transition from the college to the office? So, in the next slide, I have detailed a little bit more on the assessment itself, and you will find more details, but I will headline what are the different areas of assessment and why do they assess it, especially in the IT and IT ITES industries. So firstly, let us talk about the written test, which is largely an elimination step, and verbal ability, you all are probably aware, is assessed. But if you deep dive inside verbal ability, your vocabulary is assessed. And why is vocabulary assessed? Most of the IT industries clients are abroad, and most of the language used for communication is English, and therefore the presence of a vocabulary is very important for you to be able to do business. Therefore vocabulary is an area of assessment. Fluency is an area of assessment. So you shouldn't be struggling to construct a sentence or struggling to communicate when you are in a time crunch situation. Grammar is another, because you can't communicate something and the communication turns out or it's understood in a very different way. So vocabulary, fluency, grammar. There are types of questions for vocabulary, types of questions for fluency, types for grammar. Once you grasp the essence of it and you take a pre-quiz and understand where you are, you can then decide whether to spend more time on verbal ability or less time on verbal ability as a person preparing. Then you go to quantitative ability. Again, there are many subsections in quantitative ability. Quantitative ability, or being able to quickly size, assess, is not only a measure of intelligence, is also something that you will directly use when you are in the software field. Therefore, quantitative ability is quite central to the assessment process. So there are, you can say, ratios and proportion questions. That's one kind of this thing. If X men can do something in Y days, how long will it take for Z men to do? So that kind of questions. Ages and relationship questions. Like 5 years ago, the ratio of my age and my father's age was this. 10 years later, what will it be? So that's a age and relationship question. Then you have the time and distance question, and which will usually have a boat is going upstream, with the speed of the river is 2 kilometers per hour. The speed of the boat is 20 kilometers per hour. What time, distance, etc. Then you have tricky questions on calendar calculations, where you will have to say 63 days. Today is Wednesday, 63 days. Hence, what day will it be? And you will have to make sure that the date on which it is done, there isn't a February falling on it. You will have to make sure that the year is not a leap year. So that's calendar calculations, for example. Then you have questions on probability, questions on profit and loss, questions on areas and volumes, and a pipe is filling a water tank kind of questions, right? And then questions on functions and equations. So that's quantitative ability. Again, it will be an elimination section, and it is unlikely that each of the subsections are elimination, but quantitative ability as a whole will be an elimination section. The next is analytical ability. I think extremely important in the IT and ITES industry. Again, there are three kinds of questions in analytical ability. One is the infer question, which means that if this is true and that is true, necessarily the third one is true or not. So that kind of questions is the inference end of analytical ability. Then you have the decode questions, which means in this new language, if this word means cat, if that word means milk, this word means dog, what does this word mean? Kind of stuff. So you are actually trying to decode a new word based on a new syntax that has been defined. Then you have spatial ability or spatial reasoning, much like a cube has three of its faces painted red, blue and black, and then it is being cut into 9 pieces. How many colors, how many small cubes will have the color black, for example. So that's an example of a spatial reasoning question. So that is mainly about the written test. Then when you go to the group discussion part of it, again there are two kinds of group discussions, and when people are discussing in groups, they have to pay attention to which kind of group discussion they are indulging in. One is a problem solving group discussion. For example, how do we make our college the cleanest campus in the city, for example, is a problem solving group discussion. The second is a debate group discussion. Should we have attendance in college or not? Right? What do you think? That's a debate group discussion. Then you go to the technical interview, and in technical interview, I often find that people are a little lost. They say, I'm an engineer or I'm an MBA, I've not done programming. What do I do in a technical interview? And rest assured that if you have been called for the selection process, the interviewers are mindful of the fact that you have not had a background in it. If you have done it outside, well and good. If you are aware of it, well and good. But you can state that I'm aware of these concepts, but I'm not really deep into it, or I have not done a formal course on it. If you have done a formal course, then expect to be asked in these 5-6 areas, which is data structures and algorithms, software development lifecycle and testing, networking, web and internet, or any platform for that matter. So, and the questions will be more like awareness, right? Did you know how many layers are there in a network, for example, is an awareness question. And there will be a slight application question. So they will test the concept and say what is the difference between a data network and a voice network, and what causes these differences, for example. So there will be a concept or a slight application of the concept. There will be questions on a process map. For example, it say that describe the process map by which your school library will function or a college library will function. So it will contain books issue as a process map, stock take as a process map, new book procurement as a process map, discarding books as a process map, cataloging as a process map, number of books you can borrow as a process map. So how do you weave that all together into a systematic presentation of how the library operates as a process, for example. So that's the kind of second kind of technical questions that you might have. The third one will be puzzles, and especially in the software industry, it is not only important to be brilliant, but it's also important that you systematically approach a problem and you tenaciously approach a problem. So puzzles are a very good way to test whether you have that in you or not. So puzzles is the third kind of thing that you will be asked, and more than you knowing the answer, you will really be asked as to or evaluated on how you really think. Therefore, puzzles is one good way that you need to prepare on. The next set of questions is about algorithms and programming. You may or may not have a program familiarity, but you will be asked to look at a flow chart, right, or a flow map, and asked to draw a decision tree, for example, and say how do you draw a decision tree by which you can find out the middle number in an unsorted array. So that's an example of an algorithm question that you would really have. And definitely you should be aware that if you have done formal programming, you will be asked some formal programming questions, and much more importantly, whichever discipline you are part of, right, you will be asked questions about your discipline. If you have done 4 years of engineering or 3 years of science or arts or English or whatever you have done, you need to know about your discipline. And electrical engineers will be asked to explain Ohm's law, for example, and what does it mean, and there will be some application questions on it. So mechanical engineers will be asked how a train brakes, for example. So it will be very simple application of your engineering concepts. Structural engineers may be asked how do you evaluate the weight or load on the staircase that is there in the building on which we are interviewing, for example. So depending on where you come from, very natural application questions of your core discipline will be asked. And again, definitely expect questions about your project work. And when you talk about your project work, I think few things the interviewers are checking. One, have you done it or have you free-write it? Has somebody done it and you have just copied, right? And you will convince your interviewer that you have done it by describing challenges in the project and how you overcame them. You will, convince your interviewer that you have done it by saying what is the next scope of this project. You will convince your interviewers by saying that what language or syntax that you learned in the course of this project, for example. And you will convince your interviewers, and you will typically be asked to describe the requirements for which your project is the answer. So they will be asked to requirements. For example, you have done a remote control car, they will ask you to draw a diagram which explains the requirements of the remote control car's working. Or if you are describing a lift, for example, it will say what are the interrupts in a lift, for example. So that's the nature of assessment that you will have. When you look back, you will realize that these assessments are very logical and very natural. And if you start preparing in this manner, saying, okay, I am going to prepare for written test, now I need to be good at verbal ability, this is the threshold I am requiring, what kind of words that I need to know? So that's a vocabulary instance, for example. What kind of questions should I be able to answer on fluency and grammar? And typically you will be asked to correct an email communication from a team lead to a team member and saying there are some grammar mistakes here, why don't you correct them? For example, could be a question. So natural application questions will be there. So if you take the book and look at the selection chapter, take each area, verbal ability is an area, go to a sub area called vocabulary and look at the type of question in the book, answer them and find out how comfortable you are. If you are not comfortable, go and do more tests and more exams in that area so that you meet the threshold of the written test. And when you are preparing for the technical interview, just use this box and prepare for the technical interview. And say what are the natural questions that can happen on awareness and concept on the IT space, right? What kind of process map questions, you can't really prepare for it, but just practice a few instances. Puzzles, find out how you think, just get familiar with them, but you can't really master all the puzzles. Algorithms, again get familiar with how decision trees are made, start thinking, and there are about 20-25 problems that keep on getting asked. Just make sure that you are very good at it. And about your discipline, make sure you have fundamental understanding of the discipline, common sense understanding of the discipline. And about your project work, definitely prepare the way I had just mentioned it to you. And for viewers who are actually coming on the chat window, I'd request if you can come through the Q&A window. And please bear with me, in about 10 minutes or so we will get into the question and answers, and I will pick up some of the questions that you have and really get to answer them. Now, we talked about the selection process, right? We talked about the different elements of selection, the different areas of selection, how do you prepare, and so on. And finally, when you are preparing to be job ready, you need to create a master job readiness development plan. Everybody is not the same, right? So some of you are good at verbal, some of you are good at quantitative, some of you are good at algorithm tracking, some of you are good at puzzles, and so on. So you need to really understand, for the IT and IT industry job readiness perspective, what are the overall areas that you have, how do you assess yourself on a score of 1 to 10, and how will you develop yourself further, for example. So I have again given the detail in my book. This table is an extract from that detail where, for example, one of the areas of assessment is job market awareness and job hunting skills. And how do you know you are on a scale of 1 to 10, either on 2, 3 or 6, 7 or even 9, 10, you need to take the exercises in the job hunting chapter and solve the practice 4 exercises that is there in the book. And when you do that, you will realize whether you are feeling comfortable or uncomfortable. Then you will either give yourself a 7, 8 or you will give yourself a 4, 5. If you have given yourself a 4, 5 or lesser, then write down on this page here, and in the book you will find details of how exactly you will fix it, right? And similarly, there is the understanding of the position. So your level of job literacy about, let us say, an infrastructure administrator position that is getting advertised, for which freshers are being selected. So again, use the chapter, do the exercises, and you will realize whether you are comfortable or uncomfortable. And if you are uncomfortable, follow the instructions in the book and go and read the supplement, and with this single companion, you will then become comfortable as far as this area is concerned. Now, if you go to the technical testing areas, again you look at the selection process chapter and do the practice number 3. If you go to the GD and interview, again look at the selection process chapter and do practice number 5. If you want to test your communication skills, do selection process chapter and practice number 5. And if you want to know what kind of personality questions or the HR questions that you will be asked and what can really trip you from getting selected, and again go to some of the practice exercise number 5 and figure out whether you are answering these questions correctly or not. Again, if you look at the HR interview, there will be a set of 20-25 questions that are being asked, and there is an intent behind asking these questions. The moment you understand that, you don't have to really know all the questions, you will then comfortably answer the interviewer. Then there are 3 employability competencies: whether you can operate in a dynamic environment, are you savvy, and can you vigorously pursue results. And if you look at all these areas, you can almost do a self-assessment and then go back and say, are you comfortable, uncomfortable, and then finally decide your level of preparation in each of these sub areas. So that's how I recommend that you use the material to really become job ready for the industry. So as I said, if you have got a job offer and are about to enter the world of work, there are 4 phases that you need to be very careful about. And if you make mistakes in any of these phases, it is likely that you will have a frustrating first year, and since you have not begun well, the rest of corporate life can be very daunting. So the pre-joining to orientation phase, there are some do's and don'ts, and the moment you are allocated to a role, depending on whether somebody else was doing the job earlier or it's a new job that has been created, there are do's and don'ts for each of them. And once your first assignment is done and you are going to report back in, let's say, 3 months or 4 months, saying, I've done my first assignment, how do you describe them? How do you take feedback during the discussion? All that is actually available as exercises in the book, as guidelines in the book. As you keep doing these exercises, you will know whether you are doing right or doing wrong, and then you will be able to auto-correct yourself. Then you have the year-end review, and how do you present yourself on the appraisal? How do you take feedback? How do you ask questions? Are again detailed as far as the first year navigation of your life is concerned. Now, we have said a lot of things, and obviously I have given a little bit of a sample of each of those things that are there in the book. But if you have to weave them all together, and this is something that I would like the college placement committees and the training and placement officer to consider, and even as students, if you systematize that as a practice among friends, you will actually become much more comfortable in your overall preparation to enter the industry. One is the aha moment, right? when you look at a recruiter coming into your campus, again there are points of interaction. So how does the first email get responded to, for example? How is the brochure presented, right? How is there an understanding of the requirements of the company and some tailored profiles are being presented back to the corporate? And how do you describe your selection process or the placement process that is there? And what do you discuss about, taking the exam in a different college compared to your own college for the sake of logistics? So there are some 10-15 areas, and when you get them right, the company is likely to say, aha, this is a good college. I think I'm likely to get good candidates here. So there are these aha moments described. The second is, I think as students, you can easily create one file per company, one large file, a soft copy format, where the readiness about the company is there. And if you look at the chapters on job hunting, the chapters on job literacy, you can use those chapters to actually create the company ready reckoner. Where do they recruit from? How many people they have recruited? What is the business growth in the last few years? What is their outlook in the future? And what kind of profiles they recruit? What is their selection process? How many people they have taken year on year? So there are a set of questions, and if you answer them in a systematic manner and keep on updating, just like the newsroom gathers news about the market, you can actually keep your company ready reckoner updated, and everybody can refer to this ready reckoner to understand how to prepare for jobs in this company particularly. The third exercise is really to create a employment perspective to courseware. So today you may be reading something, right, and tomorrow you will be applying that learning. Why not learn whatever you are reading today from an employment perspective? Again, I have suggested some exercises or practices, and especially given testing as an example, and say if you are going to learn black box testing tomorrow in your class, what are the 5 things that you can do 2 days before, and how can you utilize that in class to be able to improve your fine understanding of black box testing as it is applied to real life projects. So how do you similarly create each of your courseware and find out how to assimilate it or understand it from an employment perspective? And imagine if you are able to already discuss with the interviewer about your courseware as applied to their job context, how much great they will feel and how willing they will be able to take a chance with you. So that's an employment perspective to courseware. And definitely, if you follow the slide that is here, where I have detailed each of the areas of testing and each of the sub areas, can you create a written test question bank which has different levels of difficulty? And when you look at the different levels of difficulty, then you can ask your students to practice on these written test question banks and say, hey, in this particular area and in this particular subsection, your scores are low. Or in this area, in this subsection, your question scores are high. Since your scores are high, please do make a guess. Here your scores are low, don't make a guess because there is negative marking. So you can come to so much of those conclusions in terms of how do you really play the game on that day. And that's where the practice of a written test question bank will really help you. The next is about job hunting exercises. Job hunting need not be done individually. It can also be done collectively. Groups of 3 or 4 people can actually take a job hunting assignment, and I have described those assignments in the book. The next one is a why me. So can you do a 2-minute video recording as to why should a company for a particular job consider you? And the 2-minute video, can it be rated, liked by your fellow mates? And that can be a very good source of how do you crisply present yourself for a job opportunity. And there are other things like what do you wear on the day, how do you keep your hands, how do you really gesticulate, what is your body language going to be like on the day of the interview. Again, there are lots of exercises and details that are there, and if you go and read them and practice it with friends and give each other feedback, I'm sure you will be fairly comfortable on the day of on the D-day of selection. Then you weave it all together in the individual specific job readiness development plan that we just saw in the previous slide, saying that which are the areas, what is my self-rating on a 1 to 10, how do I improve this self-rating so that I maximize my chance of getting selected for a job opportunity. I think that is how one can weave them all together. And I just sort of end or close by saying that what we are saying is an application of a lot of wisdom that's already been said. So each of the chapters in the book actually begin with this wisdom. For example, what got you here won't get you there is a chapter that talks about the differences between campus and corporate life. the different competencies that you require in corporates, and how do you really develop them. And those are fools who have not learned to walk with the world is about how do you encounter difficult things in organizations, how do you really navigate them, how can you be practical and successful. It will never rain roses. When we want roses, you must plant more roses. It's all about job hunting. Nothing will come and fall on your plate, so you have to necessarily job hunt. How do you hunt, where do you hunt, how well do you hunt is by reading job hunting chapter. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, and teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime is a systematic way to understand every job, the secret of every job, so that you can present yourself for it, you can prepare for it, and you can actually do well in it. And it usually takes me 2 or 3 days to prepare an impromptu speech, said by Mark Twain, and he said he had to make an impromptu speech, but he really rehearses, prepares, and so on. It strengthens the value of preparation. The selection process chapter is all about how do you prepare over a period of 4 or 5 months so that you become job ready and you are actually able to ace the selection process. The beginning is the most important part of the work. Really is about the chapter that talks about how do you navigate the first year. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one small step is for the training and placement officers and the placement committee, and saying that where do you start, how do you build job readiness in your students much more systematically and much more easily every day. The supreme accomplishment is to blur the line between work and play, is to figure out whether you will like doing the job that you are aspiring for or not, and it has a lot of questionnaires. If you answer, the results will tell you do you really like or you won't like doing that job. Only strengths produces results, weaknesses produces headaches, and the absence of weakness produces nothing is a great quote from Peter Drucker, and is about making sure that what you are trying to do is actually pivoting on your strengths and not your weaknesses. Right? I think that with that I conclude the presentation part of this webinar, and the book can be ordered from the McGraw-Hill website, and I understand that I see on the chat here that the team has extended a special discount offer for you for people who are attending this webinar. I think you can use the link that is there to buy the book, and I will now use this to answer the questions that we have got asked. So I will not obviously name the questionnaire, and several of you have asked similar questions, therefore I am going to bunch them all together to really answer. What are the importance of certifications for a fresher? I think if you have a relevant certification, it will always be very important. Therefore, if you can get certifications, get them. But then you don't have to necessarily go and read the latest languages, latest stuff and so on, because freshers don't get deployed in the latest stuff and on day one, especially on new technologies. So if you want a certification on a standard skill, standard area, by all means do get the certification. So that is the question. I hope I have answered this, and I have a chat here which says the session has been terminated. So let me see other questions. I hope I am online. So when the interviewer asks which company other than our company that you would like to work with, definitely don't lie, and definitely say which company you admire and why you admire that company. I think it's something that you should honestly say it. Interviewers will not take it amiss, and in fact will appreciate your honesty. In that process also share that what kind of a work environment that will get the best out of you. So what kind of job profiles are available for MBA students? Lots of job opportunities are available for MBA students in IT, and it's only increasing. I think if you look at the package based application space, it's one of the job profiles I discussed, and in the package based application space, a lot of MBAs are being called for simply because they have a better functional understanding of the area being automated. For example, if you are automating payroll, they are very natural at sketching the payroll process. If you are automating sales process, then they are very natural at saying that what is the process of sale, what is the kind of order to cash cycle that is there, what is the kind of promotion that is there, because they have done that in their MBA. Therefore, these individuals are more suited for the package based profile, and therefore have even an advantage there. I think you need to get familiar with sketching the process map for business processes. And the psychological preparation for the interview, I think definitely read the body language section. I think that will give you a lot of perspective on it, because our body language really reflects or redirects our attitude. and having the right body language will actually make sure that your psychological preparation is good. And in this book, I've tried to not say that do this, do that, because we can't anticipate all the questions that an interviewer will ask. So in the book, I've tried to give a compass to people. So you know why something is being asked. When you know why something is being asked, you are able to tackle out of syllabus or unprepared questions also easily. And that is the best psychological preparation for the job. So can you use this book to actually go to other industries? I think 60 to 70% of the book talks about job readiness for industries in general, and 30 to 40% of the book talks about the IT and ITES specific industry. So definitely you can make use of 60% of the book definitely to prepare for other industries as well, because it talks about all aspects of job readiness, not only interviewing, not only technical test, not only CV, but not only job hunting, but everything put together. So can competencies be developed? Yes, it can be developed. And the initial questionnaires that are there will tell you why you are not behaving in a certain way. Competencies are basically underlying behaviors, and if those behaviors are not natural to you, you are considered low competent. If those behaviors are natural to you, are considered high competent. For example, if a person is rebellious by nature, has actually rebelled against their father, their mother, their parents, their teachers, and so on, and therefore will not be good at boss relationship, one of the key competency clusters of savviness, then one good thing to look at is examine why you are rebellious by nature. By reorienting your value of rebelliousness, you can actually improve your competencies. Is it compulsory to talk in English? Yes, it is compulsory to talk in English, because English is a preferred language. If you are still on the learning curve on it, tell your interviewer that you are good at it to a certain extent, and that you will pick up. And there are, I have a few more questions here. So if companies delay their joining date, what should freshers do? Should they wait, or should they take up the job offer? I think you will have to ask clarity from the company saying what is the likelihood without pressurizing them. So you will get a good idea of what is the likelihood of this happening 3 months later, 6 months later. And one of the natural reasons why companies delay the joining date is because companies' fresher requirements have become uniform throughout the year, whereas freshers pass out at one particular or two particular months in the year. Therefore, they have to necessarily smoothen the joining out. It is one of the reasons why companies are now going outside campus and recruiting. Therefore, you have to really figure out and find out the criteria, and the dilemma, I understand, is very real. Because if you wait, you may forego an opportunity, but if you really take something, then you are foregoing the company. I would suggest make 2 attempts to contact your original company, and if not, take the other job offer. As a fresher, a real life experience is more important than the company that you are working for, is my take on the matter. What does a company need from a fresher? I think a company needs an employable fresher, which means that the fresher has to be able to operate in a dynamic environment, must display savviness, must have a vigorous pursuit for results, must have the logical and analytical ability, must have a basic verbal ability, must have quantitative ability, must have been able to apply themselves, should be able to pursue something tenaciously, and that is what has been detailed as to what it expects from fresher. Again, the answers are dependent on the job profile. They are available in detail in the book. Sorry. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So how do you answer such questions? I think you should be honest, and my take on the matter. If you really know where you want to go, you should say that. Otherwise, you should say for 2 years I want to do this, and after that take a call. For example, whether I need to do a technical profile or a managerial profile. So you can say that up to now I am clear. Beyond that I am not clear, and this is the way I will make the decision. And be honest. That is more important than being contrived. Does communication play a more important role than other skills? I wouldn't say that. See, basically I would say that communication is a threshold or an elimination step. So if you are not minimum good at communication, you will get eliminated. But because you are over good at communication, you will not get selected. You will get selected on the much harder skills. I think we have answered most of the questions that are here, and my promise to you that this book will help you actually shorten your preparation time. I promise that this book will help you avoid the several mistakes and can serve you as a single companion in your preparation process. And by honest and sincere wish that you all have the dream careers that you desire, and that you all have a great time preparing to be job ready, not only for the IT ITES industry but all industries in general, because a very good set of students joining the industry is what will make our companies, our country very, very successful. Thanks a lot for being on this webinar with me, and I look forward to interacting with you through the online learning center and other media in the future. Thanks a lot.
Great show.